What we thought is that we would do in this presentation is, the challenge was to give everybody a sense of us, and of course, I guess the typical way to do that is a portfolio, and that was what the little bit of film that you just saw was how we started. So we've obviously done a lot of work in a lot of different sectors. We thought another way to sort of get to know us would be to do a tour of our studio, and this is a quick slideshow. This is a sign that we commissioned from David Carson, and I particularly like the moment that in the this is actually an A that got painted out into a sort of donuted O. This is our reception space. We work in a lot of different materials and different ways, and this is part of our sample library and resource center. We do spaces, this is a space where we do sort of everything from engagement interviews, brainstorming, foresight work, pin-ups. So we have a very kind of open space. It's always a very iterative process with us, and we do many different renditions, and I think I'm probably a very frustrating designer to work with because I sort of keep pleading with the world that I have no idea what to do, and I'm sort of desperate to know what the solution is, and the only way I can do it is sort of kick into the next iteration and do something, and Helen works in a much more thoughtful and intelligent way and sort of calmly sees the process through and has bigger insights and sort of a much more methodical and process-driven methodology, and I sort of interrupt that all the time. Sometimes people laugh, and sometimes they don't. This is the sign that we have behind our coffee bar office at the David Carson, with the idea of creative, relentless, and integrated, 3 bugs that we like. This is our large open space where we, again, work in a very collaborative way. I think the fact that it has informal messiness is part of a creative process, and then I think we enjoy very much that idea that this is a studio and not an office, and that we make things, tear them apart, try again, and have that kind of more experimental, laboratory, non-precious attitude to prototyping, designing, and sketching. This is my collection of hubcaps that's in my office, which I'm not sure what I'm doing with, but I'm collecting them because I think somehow they're related to Michelangelo's Tondi, those are round relief sculptures. I haven't quite completed the circle on that thought, but I'm collecting hubcaps, so you can send them along. Charles and Ray Eames had this very beautiful pin-up wall in their space, which I have completely failed to emulate. This is me in my underwear, drawn by by our daughter, Lily, and I have a heart right there. This is part of the wood shop, where we, part of our process is obviously prototyping and making things. And again, it's quite an extensive wood shop and work area. And again, what we call a war room or a pin-up room, where we do many iterations where either the tears or laughter flows depending on the state of the process. And this is maybe our new logo.
We've been working together for a really long time, probably more than 10 years. But we only fairly recently actually officially joined forces. So both Nigel and I had our own design firms. I'm a an industrial designer by training, and Nigel's always done branding and graphic design. And we started, like probably most of you, that when we began, we really thought, oh, you know, I want to make stuff. And so the beginning of the work that we did, the beginning of the work that we did was really all about the stuff. This is a lamp that we designed that was based on a pine cone. We had spent some time up north and around a whole bunch of pine trees. And when pine cones are in a forest fire, they open up and release their seeds. So the way this lamp works, it opens up when the heat of the lamp expands the bimetallic coils on the inside. So it's a lovely thing. There's only one because it's too expensive to make.
But priceless to look at.
But priceless to look at.
We started in the same vein. You know, I started my practice. We made things or designed things again in a kind of much more in a kind of, I guess in a, you know, myopic is a very restricting word, but in a very kind of limited sense. So we used to do, and still actually do, book design. And this is a book we did for the Museum of Modern Art in New York on the work of Chuck Close, and we did many of those kinds of things, publications for institutions and galleries. And this was for the power plant here in Toronto with Arno Maggs, who's a great Canadian artist. And that art connection is no small thing, and we'll get to that a little later, but also a very important connection between Helen and I, both personally and professionally. But contemporary art, I think, feeds our practice in a very, very profound way. And in Helen's way, a very articulate, analytical, and intelligent way, and me in a completely articulate, inarticulate, and sort of bewildering and befuddled way. But what becomes nice is that those things often converge in our excitement about certain kinds of art. So we sort of react to it very differently. But art is very important. In my studio, before we joined forces, we made products. That was the biggest sort of output of what we did. And so we have a long, long relationship with a Toronto company called Gourmet Settings that makes all kinds of tableware. And so we, you know, went through, just like craftspeople in a way, the steps of making form and making objects that people really would like to use. If I was going to interject, this was kind of an amazing thing when I got to know Helen and her work, that those previous slides are these extraordinary models out of foam and wood that when you pick them up, you cannot believe the skill and detail that went into the hand making of those.
So lots and lots of different products, but our very first collaboration was for this client. And so beyond just making the products, we found that we could also integrate all the other parts of the process of bringing stuff to market out into the wider world. And so the notion of integrating full ideas for a client really came out of that collaboration. And so packaging was a big part of the offering that we developed for this client. And we still work for them. So it's been a long, long collaboration. Merchandising, full ranges of packaging.
Yeah, we were sort of transposing our background in the art world of catalogs and restraint and a kind of approach to typography and graphics, and all of a sudden finding ourselves in this commercial realm where much more free reign, and we were starting to do the copywriting and inserting all sorts of goofy phrases and things, but it really sort of opened us up to a whole range of possibilities to be working with Helen.
And even sort of the logistics of trying to understand how something presents itself in the commercial world and can still have life and a compelling visual presence.
So we were doing packaging and inserts and naming of patterns, and it just sort of tumbled into a whole series of kind of endless promotional things and wrapping papers and box patterns, and it was a very, very fulsome and playful relationship with a client that really sort of enabled that in a kind of truly remarkable way. It was absolutely green light on so many things.
And so because it was so fruitful, we collaborated with another client, QuisiPro, which is also another Canadian client, which distributes kitchen tools, kitchen products around the world. And so we developed, I think at the end of the day, more than 250 products for them. But trying to build a common visual language for all of these component parts that were going to be seen together in a retail space, but previously had been disparate, just bits and pieces. And so how did we bring them together from a visual perspective and from a functional perspective? So this is a cheese grater, some of the early work, and turns into these hopefully lovely and very ergonomic pieces. You know, the parts of every day that can be much more elevated because you touch them all the time and they're part of your normal life. And again, as we move through this, none of that is complete without the graphic component to it.
Yeah, so I think that idea of integration, so then Helen asked us to work on that sort of expression of the brand, and I think what our kind of slightly contrarian reaction was, rather than do a design that would be completely in sync with that kind of curvaceous drawing, was to do a perhaps a bit more crisp as a kind of a more of a, not a rebuttal, but a platform. And then we art directed a kind of series of very elegant photographs and started doing the catalogs and running out a very, this kind of white and red look and feel across packaging systems, hang tags and boxes.
So based on that, the next step in our evolution, so we've been product designers and branding company, and you know, we wanted to do more. We wanted to solve bigger problems. I think that's a fundamental part of being a designer, is you want to solve problems out in the wider world. And so we really became interested in innovating in a big way. And so I hold a whole bunch of patents for materials and processes and products. But we wanted to work on something much bigger. And so a client came to us and asked us to work in the healthcare industry. And so we developed a whole series of highly researched and completely new to the marketplace furniture that would meet a wide range of needs in healthcare. And so to do that, we undertook a very long and rigorous research process. This is in the shop. We measured all these people to see how they sat in chairs and how they got into and out of chairs. We worked with materials and processes to build out a new way of understanding how seating could be. And in the process of working on this project, there was a really major event in Toronto, which was SARS happened. And we had been anticipating that infection control was going to be a really big issue in healthcare. And so it dovetailed with the research that we were already doing. And so we thought about how these forms and the materials that we're using could begin to solve a problem as big as that in the healthcare industry. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, we built furniture that would be completely enshrouded in silicone, which was completely new and is a patented process. In fact, at the end of the day, when we brought the product out, the patent is for the largest piece of molded silicone in the world. And that's the yellow part that you see on this chair. So it's got no other furniture had been made like that before. And the reason that it works so well to counter infection control is you can just wipe it with soap and water, not toxic chemicals, and no bacteria or fungus or virus can grow on it. So it's a big deal in healthcare. And so for the client, what they needed, because they'd never been in that marketplace before, is they needed a modular system of components that they could configure to become a whole series of different pieces of furniture, because they couldn't just bring one piece into the marketplace. And so we developed this whole range of furniture. And this was a really long project, a 7-year project from start to finish. And it's actually ongoing. We've been making some, they've asked us to come back and make some changes and some new iterations of the chair. So that's a pretty involving kind of project. It again kind of pushed us to a new level where we wanted to understand even more than just how to make it technically correct. We wanted to really understand the motivations behind the people that are going to use our products. And so more lately, sometimes clients will come to us just specifically for the insights that we have about their customers. We have a huge studio. It's nearly 10,000 square feet. We are able to transform it into a place that's essentially a lab to gather information. And so part of what we want to do is understand stuff from gathering information widely, but also we can host events where we can observe people doing things. And so this is some of the food from an event that we hosted where we watched people eat. And we videotaped.
With their hands, with their hands. That's the whole idea. How do people eat with their hands?
People eat with their hands. And we videotaped them. And then we analyzed and found stuff that we never expected to find. Right? So some of the movements that you make, when you look at them in precise and tiny detail, they're much more complicated than you might imagine. And so this kind of ethnography is now an approach that we use on a really regular basis to try and understand what will make something of value to people, what will make something that people want to use and can use in a more effective way. So we've used that for other clients too. So gathering deeper insights in a broader way. This is for nursery, garden and nursery center, that we did a broad analysis of their needs and did a whole integrated offering of signage and advertising and brand development, their loyalty cards, but we also designed their uniforms. And we had, in order to do that, we had to go onto their site and understand all of the conditions that they might be working in, inside, outside, in the cold, in the hot, in an office, in the dirt. And so that's an entirely different kind of hybrid kind of work that we had never done before. It's part two-dimensional and it's part three-dimensional, but it's very much about understanding what people want and need. And so,
I didn't know this was going to happen.
So again, our work keeps changing and growing, and you know, I guess by our nature as designers, we always want to be thinking in different ways. And so the most recent work that we've been doing is really about anticipating. So we've taken what we have native, all of us as designers, which is that curiosity about what will come, and we now use a fairly rigorous process to do foresight. And what foresight basically is planning for the future, trying to understand what might be coming in the future and trying to put it into some kind of format that you can actually use in your today. And so I'm sure lots of you have seen the sticky note method, but we use that in a really complete way in the studio. We also gather information from a wide range of sources. So this is a big Google Doc that we've been developing for a particular client that's interested. One of the things that they're interested in is what the impact of climate change is going to be in certain sectors in the future. And so in order to have that projection forward, we need to gather information from a wide range of sources. And so you'll see in here, we've been sort of trolling the internet trying to find authoritative scientific journals and even, you know, just headlines from gossip magazines, and combine them together, filter them, synthesize them to try and get an understanding of what the future holds, creating patterns and trends of information.
Can you just talk for a sec? There's this sort of nuance between predictive work and probable work and plausible work.
So the work that we do, just like the work that you do, is not about predicting the future. It's about creating possible scenarios for the future that are plausible, that people might realistically see could happen. And so using that, you can then make plans today for something that could happen in the future. And sometimes you think of catastrophic things that could happen, and sometimes you think of really mundane things that could happen. But they're plausible. They're not outlandish predictions.
Any foresight like that for any larger company or government then puts them in a position that a challenge or even a crisis can be, of course, an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it really is just trying to prepare a kind of open-mindedness to plausible future happening.
So something that we are just working on as very new work for us is to take what's very close to us and build it into that process. And so Nigel talked before about how art is so much of interest to us, so important to us. And what we think is that art is also a really predictive tool. And so we're exploring now what the role of art in foresight might be. And so that's just the next layer of work that we're going to be doing. This is a work by Tadashi Kawamata, who is a Japanese artist. And this piece made out of old pallets just shows kind of the tumble of excess. But interestingly, this was done just before the tsunami hit in Japan, and many of the news photographs really paralleled these kinds of images. And so what is all that stuff when it's all crumpled and of no use anymore? This is a photograph by Andreas Gursky, and I don't know how many of you know his work, but it looks like a photograph, but it's actually a manipulated photograph. And he did a whole series of pieces on cities. Well, now we know that by 2030, I think the expectation is much more than half of the world's population will live in cities, not bright shining towers, but maybe cities that look and feel more like this. And so how could we imagine our own futures if this was part of where we all lived?
Yeah, it's a very complex idea, because obviously you're kind of attracted by these images, perhaps, which I know I am in a kind of very formal way. And again, the sort of I become inarticulate about it because I'm sort of absorbing it on many levels, because to me there's sort of this astounding beauty, but really there's a whole layered series of, I would suggest, slightly predictive or intuitive senses that Gursky is absorbing and reflecting in his artwork about today and the future. When you think about globalization and compactness and density and urban phenomena that he is articulating in his work, I find it very, very powerful and sometimes quite emotionally moving.
I'm sure most of you have seen this image. Damien Hirst built this jewel-encrusted skull. He built it and put it on offer for sale right before the global financial meltdown. And he offered it for sale for £50 million, and it was purchased.
By himself?
By himself. Revealed later.
Under the radar, very clever. That was part of the art, too.
Yeah. So it's a...
Partially by himself.
It's partially by himself.
By a consortium.
It's a statement about the excess of wealth and in such a creepy kind of way, about mortality and about how we feel about inanimate objects that we place so high above everything else, and at such a prescient moment right before the whole world is scraping by, right? And of course, this is Banksy. This particular piece was in Bristol in 2011, and again, I would say pretty prescient for all the street violence that happened in the UK later in the summer. We use all of those signals and those bits of information and try and workshop ideas that are patterns with clients or with groups of people to try and come up with scenarios, as I said before. And then really work backwards to try and create a timeline for what that change might look like going forward.
And I think the most, sort of key to this, or something, the thread that goes throughout it, is, of course, the idea of collaborating. And collaborating works on many levels. We collaborate with our clients who sort of initiate projects, but beyond just the client themselves, we're finding that a lot of our work involves collaborating with a larger group of stakeholders and doing engagement strategies. So there's that kind of collaboration. And there's collaborating with suppliers, and of course we work with photographers and writers, and this is installing a bridge at St. Mike's Hospital, where we had done signage across the bridge. So there's that kind of supplier, contractors, and then very absolutely core and key to us is collaborating with a team who are here today at the back, filling up the seats back there. So we really did want to thank everyone there: Chloe, Danielle, Gary, Jane, Joe, Johnny, Julie, Karen, Lindsay, and Scott, for their hard work, and they're very much essential to all our work, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for that they put up with us. And just in closing, I think, if I was going to sum up, we were going to sum up what we've just been talking about, if there's a pattern overall, is the fact that our studio has evolved, and that the need to evolve from a kind of basic, nearly primordial need to make stuff into kind of more the intellectual pursuit, into how we are solving problems and then working and collaborating with clients, has, for both of us, been a kind of a thread evolution of not just kind of projects, but what our breadth of capacity is and the kind of things that we work on. And evolution and change can be very, a little bit frightening. I'm quite curmudgeonly in life. Helen, thank God, is optimistic and has a sunny disposition, so there's that two qualities. But evolution is absolutely a key, the idea of change and having that flexible and adaptive attitude to evolving to not the next client or the next problem or next challenge that's afforded us.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks.